And it's going on Twitter?
Yep. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and we're brought to you by Pick Six, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Use code RWPicks for $50 in Pick Six credits with a $5 deposit. My guest this week for the final regular season podcast I'll be doing this year, Eno Sarris of The Athletic. I'm sure you all know who Eno is. Very excited for you to hop back on, man, and talk some young pitchers with me.
Yeah, James, good to see you. I'm going to see Goose this weekend.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, at Frost. That'll be fun.
Wow. First time?
I'll tip one up for you. Yes, first time.
Awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And
you haven't left the house much recently, I'm guessing.
Thank you. I hear lots of people are doing fun stuff out of that.
Cool. You've got a baby.
But I will get to see you in Arizona for
that'll be fun. So yeah,
it'll be great. So let's talk about some young pitchers who we can kind of start analyzing already for 2025. Spencer Schwellenbach, I think, is maybe the top rookie pitcher to discuss to start things off here. Kind of came out of nowhere this year with Atlanta, was obviously excellent in the minors to start the season, and then just didn't really skip a beat after getting to the big leagues. His 4.8% walk rate would be a top 10 mark among qualified starters. And he's kind of an interesting case where it's a 101 stuff plus, but like location plus and pitching plus. Love Spencer Schwellenbach. So what are you seeing with Schwellenbach as we look ahead to 2025?
Yeah, I think there's a kind of an important lesson here, even among the different pitchers that have come up in Atlanta recently. You've seen AJ Smith-Shawver come up, Hurston Waldrop. There's been a bunch of pitchers that come through, and he's the one who's found the most success among the young guys that have come through. And I think one thing that's important to do sometimes is to look at the components of Stuff Plus and realize that he has a pretty special fastball. He's a 110 Stuff Plus fastball. 4-seam fastballs, the average is around 97. So this is a plus fastball, and it's not the same velo. Smith-Shawver has better velo. I think Waldrop had better velo. It's a more unique, more interesting shape. That's something that Stuff Plus can capture. That I think is even hard for us to capture with our eyes. You might watch a Smith-Shawver fastball and think that's just a better fastball than Schwellenbach's. But Stuff Plus captures the uniqueness of he throws like a shortstop. He was a shortstop in college that then converted to pitching. So he throws kind of from this weird sort of, shortstop arm angle, not like a pitcher over the top. He's more out there. And yet he cuts the fade on that pitch. So he throws this weird kind of a cut rightish fastball from a weird angle. So anyway, it's a unique fastball. It's a really good one. He has then started to put together the rest of his arsenal, and some of those numbers will reduce his overall Stuff Plus, but increase the effectiveness of his pitching. That's what you're talking about with his pitching plus numbers being good. So I really like him. It's a wide arsenal, unique fastball, good enough velocity. The slider is good enough. The curve is good enough. The splitter, he told me he doesn't practice. He shows up, he tries it. If it works that day, he uses it. If not, he doesn't. So I don't know if that's an avenue for him to improve going forward. But there could be some improvement in the changeup that could, even uncover a little bit more upside beyond. I just don't know. My question to you is, if we both like him, what's his ceiling? Like, do you think he could join the top 15? I somehow think he's good, but I'm not sure that I see him being like ever, one of the top 5 picks among starters in the league.
Yeah, so he's also up over 160 innings, and he's 24, which I think is really impressive. And he, Atlanta is as good a spot as any to chase wins with a pitcher. So I could see an avenue for him, maybe in a best case scenario, finishing as a top 15 fantasy pitcher. But is it? I'm kind of looking at him more in sort of that like Bryce Miller, like Tanner Bybee, Brandon Pfaadt kind of area. Does that sound about right?
I think I'll have him. So I just did a pod with Nick Pollock called The Craft, where we looked at our wins and losses from last year. And I had Bryce Miller at 34. Consensus had him at 46, and he ended up 7th. But that speaks, I think, directly to our entire conversation, right? I think I'll have him somewhere in the 30s.
Mhm.
If everything pops right, he could enter the top 10, top 15. But I just don't know if he'll be a perennial guy. Like, is he going to turn into a Corbin Burns or a Zach Wheeler? Like, I just don't know if he has that top end velo or that like amazing singular pitch, that those guys have. So I'm gonna say that the upside to join the top 20, probably have him somewhere in the 30s.
Yeah, and he was a SP 44 in the too early meatball DC that I was.
Oh, that lines up perfectly with Bryce Miller. Bryce Miller was consensus 46. I'm 34. That's the sort of ticket that's going to be. I'm going to have him in the low 30s, and consensus hopefully will keep him in the 40s.
Well, so I'm trying to hang on to AL Labor, and you couldn't make it this year. And I think that might be why, because I got Bryce Miller there, and I
would have had Bryce Miller.
I got Colton Cowser there for like $1 or something.
Oh yeah, we traded for Colton Cowser in the league we are together, so we like those players.
Yeah, so I appreciate you just sitting out this year. Bowden Francis of the Jays, you picked up Bowden Francis in our Devils Rejects Dynasty League, 20-team Dynasty League. You added him June 7th after he threw, or June 10th after he threw 4 scoreless innings against Oakland. And then he wasn't like always working as a starter every time out after that, but he's just been awesome since then. 2.2 ERA. He's got a 0.75 whip this year as a starter, does Francis, and 20.7 K minus walk overall as a starter. So what did you see in Francis initially to have you jump on him for our dynasty squad in early June? And, what are you envisioning for him next season?
Yeah, so I actually had him in my just outside of my top 100 going into the season, because again, here's a theme, I guess: good fastball shape. So he has a good fastball shape, if not the biggest velo. And then what I saw June 7th was A, they're looking at him as a starter, so opportunity, and B, that was the first time he really threw a splitter a lot. And so what I liked about his breaking balls is they had decent shape, but they're slow. He throws slow breaking balls. And, as much as velo matters for fastballs, they matter for breaking balls. So the magic number for a slider is 85 miles an hour. He throws his 80, 82. The magic number for the curveball is 80 miles an hour. He throws his 73. So, that was the thing that's holding me back from liking him more. So seeing the splitter, I was like, okay, we got something now. I mean, it's not only is it that he throws it harder, he throws it 85. Now he's kind of has a wide band of velos that hitters have to, but also different shapes and a potential for a new thing. So anytime I see a massive change in pitch mix, that's something where I start looking at the stuff. I start looking at how it mixes in with the rest of their pitches. And, generally you can just jump on a guy who has a massive pitch mix change just to be in front of the market.
Yeah, I mean, great job there. He's up to like 122 innings, I think now.
He's not young.
No, and he's 28, so I would think they'll just kind of turn him loose next year.
Yeah, and they need pitching. So
right. So I mean, it sounds like you're kind of thinking of him maybe in like a couple tiers, maybe below like a Schwellenbach.
I'd have him a little bit below. I mean, you just look at things like swinging strike and stuff, and fastball velo and age, and I think I'd have him below, but I'd probably still have him in my top 50.
Yeah,
maybe even top 40. I mean, like somebody like Jose Barrios versus him, I'm just gonna take him because the error bars are going in the right direction. Like he might be this good.
right.
Barrios is only going to get worse, really.
Yes, that's true. And I saw Barrios get dropped in some very competitive leagues this year. So
yeah.
David Festa of the Twins was a guy that I was pretty excited to like. We were kind of waiting, like when are they going to go to him over like Varland or whatever, like earlier in the year. And he's walked a lot of batters, Festa, but he always just strikes a ton of guys out. Had a really bad first couple starts in the big leagues, but 64 Ks and 50 innings since then for David Festa. Where are you at on him? I mean, I know there's been some frustrating starts as a guy that has Festa in some leagues where he just the control hasn't been there, and it's been a shorter outing. But the strikeout upside seems pretty high with Festa.
Yeah, and again, really good fastball shape, 95 miles an hour, 2 inches better ride than average. So it's a good riding fastball. He throws, was talking about the magic number for breaking balls. He throws an 86 mile an hour slider with plus drops. So that's his foundation. I think he can get into trouble, when maybe he faces a bunch of lefties or he can't spot the slider because it's not a wide arsenal. And, sometimes you'd prefer, that's kind of the difference between him and Schwellenbach, where like Schwellenbach and him both have fastball slider as their core, but Schwellenbach throws more credible pitches and has more credible options, whereas Festa gets locked into fastball slider. So I would, he will rise in my rankings next year if I hear in spring, and especially if I see him throw a third pitch a lot more.
Yeah, because it's I mean the changeup just not good. Not really much of an option for him.
And he keeps throwing it, but it doesn't have good results. It's got a 465 slugging this year, and I think there's got to be something better he can do. If it's, I would just guess that if he can spin a slider that well, why not a curve or a cutter, or kind of give different looks from the breaking ball. So I do like him. I think he might end up in. I have a sort of a tier. I tend to rank for 15-team people. That's what I play the most in. And so I have a tier around 75, which is like, this is where you kind of take some shots. These are guys you pick up, and if it doesn't work out, you didn't invest that much. And he will definitely be there or a little bit higher. He'll be in that. I want shares of Festa. I just don't want to spend too much. And I think he's doing enough to show us that he won't be that expensive in drafts next year. And yet he's got the good Ks, good BBs, like he's good stuff. Like he's lining up for, like, he's going to be one of those guys where I don't think the market will push him too hard, and he'll still be an interesting sleeper next year.
Awesome. Well, I've got another young pitcher that I think you might have a similar feeling about here, but want to head to a quick break, get some messages in from our sponsors. If you like videos like this one, please consider subscribing and giving us a like on YouTube. Did you ever play the over-under game with your friends? Think I can eat that slice of pizza in under 30 seconds, or I know it'll take you over a minute to down that 2-liter. If you have, then you're going to love Pick 6, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Here's how to play during baseball season. Pick between 2 and 6 players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat like runs, hits, strikeouts, and more. Track your picks and play against others for a shot to win huge cash prizes. That's all there is to it. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code RWPicks. New customers play $5 and get 50 in Pick 6 credits. That's code RWPicks for new customers to play $5 and get 50 in Pick 6 credits only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. One per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 18 plus in most eligible states. Not available in all states, including New York and Connecticut. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. All right, back with Eno Sarris here, talking about some breakout pitchers. Eno mentioned that David Festa might be kind of in that high upside, low risk range for him. I think this next pitcher, Ben Brown of the Cubs, might even be cheaper, but I know Eno likes Brown. We got some flashes as an SP. I think he only threw 5 innings 3 times this year, though, in the big leagues before the neck injury ended Ben Brown's season. So I know you like Brown, but, what's your confidence level in him heading into next year as a starter?
Yeah, he's interesting because he has the same sort of quote unquote problem as David Festa in that he's a two pitcher guy. And the good news for both of them is that both of the types of pitches they throw, the gyro slider, the power curve, the four seam, don't have, it's not like he's a sinker slider guy. He should be theoretically be able to get lefties out, but it means it's not a wide arsenal. It means it's hard to turn the lineup over a lot. You'll see Festa and Brown both struggle to go deep into games. So if you're talking about a quality start league, they're not really great options for you. On the other hand, they both feature good stuff, and Brown's stuff might be better than Festa's. I mean, he's a future closer if it doesn't work out. I mean, he is a top end stuff for me. I really enjoy, watching people 96 miles an hour with good ride, plus an 87 mile an hour curveball with curveball drop, not slider drop. I mean, it's a really good combo. It's a Kimbrel-esque in a way, if he wants to go that way. If he wants to be a starter, he has thrown better, maybe tertiary pitches than Festa. He just doesn't have the command. Mm-hmm. If you think Festa doesn't have great command, Brown's is worse. And so that's why he doesn't throw. Think a little bit like Rodon, where Rodon struggled to be more than a two-pitch guy because he just couldn't command the other pitches. There's a little bit of that with Ben Brown. Could he dominate with the two he has? It's possible. And so I will have some shares of Ben Brown too. In fact, I think they will end up in the same tier, but I might have Festa one ahead because I think his command's a little better. Plus, he's not coming off of injury.
Right. Yeah, I always ranked Festa higher as a prospect just because of the command aspect. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm really interested to see where the price is on Ben Brown, because I think the injury, the fact that he didn't really have a 2-month stretch. It was more kind of like a 4-week stretch of looking really good as a starter, like in the middle of the season. So I think Brown could be an interesting, a really affordable high upside flyer in early drafting season.
Well, you've been pointing out the innings on the other guys, and this is another reason why he's not necessarily going to necessarily rise above 70th or whatever in rankings, is because he only put together 55 and a third. I wonder, I guess they can't send him to the AFL at this point in his career, but he needs innings. So, best case scenario, you can project him for 100 innings next year, I think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he didn't pitch at all in the minors this year. That's surprising, actually. Yeah. Well, it'll keep the price down, but I think you're right. Zebby Matthews of the Twins. Actually, I had Festa ranked ahead of Matthews as a prospect for most of the time, kind of up until the very end there. And I think people maybe got a bit too carried away with the hype on Zebby Matthews just because of the minor league stats. But what do you think? I mean, there are some estimators that say he was really unlucky. It's interesting to me that he had a 100 location plus.
Yeah, I think he's a command guy. I mean, that's probably something that you spotted in the rankings. The prospects report over at Fangraphs has him at 55 command. And so you've got some really tiny walk rates on Zebby Matthews. So even if it's not command, he's control. He throws in the zone. And so that's something I like about him. It's probably a legit 3-pitch mix with, the possibility of adding more. I think he has a good feel for pitching. And that might mean, he throws more curveballs next year and he improves the changeup. I'm going to have him behind Festa. It'd be interesting. I might have him ahead of Brown. He'll have more innings than Brown next year, probably. And the strikeout rate's pretty good. The command is maybe above average to elite. There's a lot of nice things to say about him, even if it's not necessarily that he has top end stuff or a very unique fastball or anything.
Yeah, sort of a boring fastball. Is that kind of the big separator between him and Francis?
Yeah, I mean, 94.9 on the fastball with slightly above average ride. it's funny to call that boring these days. The average fastball around the league is 94, and for starters is like 93 and a half or 93 plus. So it's not the velo that he stuff wise he might be equal to Francis.
Yeah, cool.
But Francis has a little wider arsenal, right now. Yeah. Why would I rank Zebby that far behind Francis? I don't know. Where do you think you're going to have Zebby?
Zebby, I was just trying to add up his innings in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he was at like 4 levels. So, got to pull up Baseball Reference for that.
77, like 130 innings, 135.
It's pretty good.
So he could have 150
Zebby,
innings next year.
I like I think he's got a pretty high floor relative to the guys we're talking about. Because the Twins, I think they'll just go with him next year.
It could be a slightly higher for like draft and holds, where you just need the innings and you can maybe play the matchups week to week, and you're just happy to have a guy that,
So if they've got next year, let's say Joe Ryan's healthy, who's the odd man out of Zebby, Simeon Wood Richardson, and Festa?
For me, it's Wood Richardson.
Yeah.
I just he pushed it to 93 miles an hour this year, but in the past he's had way worse fastball velocity. And if it takes a step back at all, and it's 92 next year, his strikeout rate's not that good. If you're talking about like elite stuff, elite breaking pitch, elite command, Zebby's going to be closer to elite command. Festa's going to be closer to elite stuff, and Simeon Woods Richardson the third in all of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he seems like you'd feel pretty decent if he was your 6th starter, maybe.
Yeah.
You can't. Okay, so I like fell in love with, like, I always think I had Hayden Birdsong ranked pretty high relative to a lot of people as a prospect, but I just like really fell in love with him early on when he was breaking into that Giants rotation, and then command was obviously a big issue, but I still really like Birdsong's stuff. What do you think? I like the size too. I like the youth. I like the team context. It's just that command.
Yeah, and we've talked about it, and the good news is he's aware of it and he's not trying to run from it, or wasn't mad I brought it up. He talks about, he does things like he puts a weighted ball in his front glove to try and come through at the right time. He says he has good breaking ball command because in the breaking balls, he's out in front and he can finish them right, but he's behind on the fastball, and that's when he sprays it. The bad news is that he's been working on this for a while and hasn't gotten anywhere. Also the 4-seamer has less ride than the average pitch and a little more tail. So it could actually be kind of a secret 2-seamer. The thing that's funny is that the trend around the league right now is to add more fastballs, add a sinker, add a cutter, have 3 fastballs, have 2 fastballs. And I wonder if that trend might actually work in his favor. If he goes into spring and says, I'm going to work on a cutter and I'm going to work on a sinker and just try to have more looks from the fastball, he may find that he commands one of those better. What if he starts throwing a cutter and he's cutter, slider, curve, and the cutter he can just command it better because it's a little bit more like his breaking balls and he can finish it out in front, and then he just sprays the fastball every once in a while as an out pitch, 0-2 count, throw that fastball high, I see lots of ways forward for him. And the nice thing is elite breaking balls, maybe 2 elite breaking balls, like really good breaking balls that even in a bad season produced a really good whiff rate and a really good strikeout rate, combined with a good park context and 120 innings. So in his pocket. So that's a guy that I really like. Him and Landon Rupp are 2 guys that I enjoy in the back end of that Giants rotation. I think probably Birdsong ends up 5, Rupp 6, but they're both going to be relevant, and I like them both.
Do you think Rupp? Do you think how many innings do you think they can get out of Rupp next year? Like,
well, Rupp tells me that the big thing he's doing is working on a cutter in the spring and to be a starter.
okay.
And so they've got this year out of him 57, 65 innings. It's much more of a reliever situation. But he started in the past. This is the first year he really went to relieving. So there's a chance that they could get 80 or 100 out of him. And that's why he's probably the 6th starter.
And then you have like Mason Black as like 7th.
I think so.
Yeah.
There's some things I like about Black, but I like the other 2 guys better.
Yeah, I mean, Birdsong, I know because he's been working on the control for a long time just because the stuff's always been really good. But he does have fewer than 20 starts at AA. He only made 2 starts at AAA. He made just 7 starts at High A in 2023. So
it's not like he's been doing this forever and hasn't gotten anywhere. And some of those years he had okay walk rates. So, he's kind of, if you look at his walk rates in the minors versus Edward Cabrera's are worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Is Birdsong, do you like him enough to have him kind of in that Festa range?
I think so. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I'm digging that. And I think Birdsong's going to be pretty cheap just because of the surface stats being much uglier than some of these other guys.
Yeah, I wish if his fastballs were better, you could say like, oh, best case scenario turns out that it's like a Dylan Cease. But that's the guy I kind of think of when I talk about, when I think about, what's the best case scenario for a guy with not great command. But Glass now too.
Sure, yeah. And I mean that, like I said, I love Birdsong's size, like 6'4", seems pretty athletic, seems just kind of
exactly. Still baby face too. Looks like a kid.
He looks like he should be an Orioles position player prospect.
Yeah, that's right.
So I was surprised to see Landon Knack of the Dodgers with a 105 stuff plus. He's I remember when he first got drafted, he was sort of this like older version of like George Kirby with worse stuff, but now
he's 27, huh?
Seems to be kind of like it's more almost like stuff over command now. So I don't know. Is Knack like just like 5th, 6th starter type of guy, or do you see something there?
Yeah, one of the things that I hate about Stuff Plus is that it's a black box and it doesn't tell you exactly why it likes certain things because it's really looking at all the aspects and throwing them together. One of the things I like about it though is that it can take somebody with Landon Knack where you say, okay, 93 miles an hour of the fastball, that's not great. Then you say plus 3 inches of ride. Well, that's pretty good. And then you see the release point. You're like, ooh, that's interesting. It's got a good ride out of, not a Nick Pivetta type fastball release. So you put that all together, and that's why why Stuff Plus really loves his fastball. And he kind of strikes me a little bit along the lines of the Festa Schwellenbach, fastball slider that's Landon Knack's core. And he's, if there was a continuum between Schwellenbach and Festa, Knack is in between because he throws a curve and he throws a change and he throws them the curve 16% of the time, the change 15% of the time. They're just not rated that highly. And even in the game yesterday against the Padres, it seemed like the Padres were hunting the curve because the fastball and slider are so good. So there's still some steps he needs to take forward, but I really like him. And I think it's kind of code red in that Dodgers rotation right now with all the injuries. I mean, they lost River Ryan for next year too. And I don't even know when Emin Sheen comes back. So it's like, I think Landon Knack is in that opening day rotation, and opening day Dodgers rotation, even if he's a 5 and dive with a good fastball slider, I think he's going to do well. Yeah,
it could have like a Tyler Anderson type of like double-digit win year where it's just like.
Yeah, a little bit less surprising because he has the stuff for it, but I didn't know the backstory about it. 27 years old. That's
I think he was like 23 when he was drafted or something like that.
It's a little bit like Schwellenbach in that, like, the Dodgers had everybody else come through. Oh, it's Sheehan. Oh, it's Bobby Miller. Oh, and then it's like, no, it's Landon Knack.
The guy we've got on our Devil's Reject team is Ben Casparius. Is there like I just always had him pegged as a reliever, and then you mentioned how good the AAA data was on him, and he only made the 4 innings in the big leagues this year, but was working as a starter at AAA and AA to begin the year. But just the walk rate, it's basically been sticky for like 4 years in that like 11.5% range.
Yeah, and Location Plus pretty much agrees with it. So that's going to be his downfall. He's it's actually a little bit Birdsong-esque. I just think that the way they've treated him in this most recent call up and downturn and everything doesn't suggest that the Dodgers have him super valued super highly.
Yeah.
Like he has a really small window for making that rotation. It's like early next year, because if Sheehan comes back and if Bobby Miller, with the knee, if Bobby Miller's knee is better next year and his command is any better, like those two guys are going to leapfrog Casparius pretty quickly, and he's going to end up maybe relieving. I mean, if he stays with the Dodgers, he relieves, or he ends up trade fodder and he ends up somewhere else. I think if he ends up somewhere else, you get more excited about Casparius next year.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. You mentioned the Padres against Knack earlier. Did you see? So Sean Burke of the White Sox, I actually picked him up in a dynasty league, I think yesterday, and he just absolutely shoved against the Padres. What was that? Just a few days ago here, he had 8 Ks, 1 earned run, 2 hits, 1 walk in 6 innings in San Diego. And Sean Burke, like, just not someone I don't even think he's ever been on the top 400 as a pitching prospect in the White Sox system. He's been sort of hovering around their top 20 for all these years just because it hasn't been a good system. But, he really struggled with the walks again this year in the minors, but that hasn't really been an issue thus far in the big leagues. And the stuff's just seemed really loud from Sean Burke. So could this be one of those really late in the year, actually like actionable things happening with a pitcher, or just late season small sample stuff?
Oh, it's really hard to figure out. I mean, he pitched 72 innings this year in the minor leagues with the ERA over 5.
Yeah.
And a walk rate of over 13%. So, it's not where your traditional sleepers come from. But, and this is a word of caution. So Location Plus right now for him is 102. And I noticed something similar with Ben Brown when he was coming up, that, that he was, everyone said that Hunter Brown. Everyone said that Hunter Brown had terrible command. But I looked through his minor league locations and his major league locations, and I was like, hey, they're league average, which is not saying he has plus command, but it says to me like he has enough to make it work. So right now, Sean Burke in the major leagues has a 102 Location Plus. And in the minor leagues, he, despite that walk rate that he was showing, had a Location Plus above 100 as well. And we're talking now about when you compare the two, when you combine the two, 1,500 pitches. So normally Location Plus is something you don't want to look at too early. It takes a little while. It takes like 400, 500 pitches to become online. But now that we have AAA locations for Sean Burke and major league locations, and they're above average despite this walk rate, and then you put in a little bit of context, which is the White Sox probably had the worst player development in big leagues.
Yeah. Yep.
Don't you think? Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah. So, like, I heard, I don't know if it's still true, and I don't want to besmirch their name, but if they've changed this, but I heard a while back that they weren't even preparing their players in the minor leagues for games the way you would in the major leagues. They weren't even giving them scouting reports. They, people got to the major leagues, they're like, what's that? So I just wonder, and then this is true of all teams. Coaching is better at the major league level.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, that's true of all teams. Even in the A's here recently, they don't have great player development. They called up Lawrence Butler, and one of the things that they said at the press conference was, we do more of our player development in the major leagues because our coaches are better in the major leagues. So it's possible that Sean Burke was throwing pitches that he shouldn't throw as much of in the minor leagues, or he was trying to throw to locations that he can't command. And the major leagues are like, hey, let's not throw that location. You're not very good there, So major league coaches, and Ethan Katz is a good one. He might be better suited to being like, hey, your miss patterns say, here, let's like the thing like where Tyler Glasnow comes to the Rays and they say, we'll give you one target,
Right.
So if I look at Sean Burke, I didn't look at him until you asked me to.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at him until like
totally under the radar. Totally on the radar. I don't love that his slider doesn't rate well by Stuff Plus. It's not a good slider. It doesn't hit a lot of the magic numbers. It's hard, but it doesn't have a good drop. But he has a good curveball and he has a good changeup. And so if he has a good curveball, I kind of think he might have a better slider in the future, especially work with Ethan Katz some more. I don't know. I liked what I saw. Good command, not good command, good stuff, and better command than the walk rates suggest.
Yeah, I really liked the fastball. I mean, he's 6'6", 230 as well. Like just power righty, power fastball. So yeah, just see if Sean Burke's out there in your dynasty leagues here. I know he was rostered already in DR. He was rostered in another dynasty league I'm in, so he might already be
20 teamers or whatever.
Yeah, but just keep in mind I'll be adding Burke on the end of season prospect rankings here. So cool pop-up guy. What do you think about, like, let me just throw out a few names, see if you like any of them. A couple lefties, got Cade Povich and Joey Cantillo. Either of those guys do anything?
Povich's fastball shape is really bad. And I think you can even see it when you watch. It's 92. So he has some feel for pitching, and he may prove me wrong by having a wide arsenal and throwing the cutter a lot and, mixing and matching. But I've been mostly out on Povich since I got his pitch data. Cantillo has a really good changeup and not great command, if I remember correctly. But the velo has been up and down a little bit too. 92 right now. He's had some really bad walk rates in the minors. And the location plus right now is 95, which is not great. So I don't know that I'm putting these guys at the top of my list, my sleeper list, but Cantillo has that staff, that Guardians team has been in the past pretty good at developing starters, and so I'll have Cantillo in the low hundreds maybe, as a guy. Povich is, nobody's going to draft Povich off of my rankings probably.
No. I think I like Cantillo more than like Logan Allen, say this time last year.
Yeah.
We're talking about like Guardians lefties, but
better strikeout rates, better changeup. Yeah.
This seemed like a down year to me for just like kind of, because this is like the third year I think we've talked about pitchers here at the end of the season. It seemed like kind of a weak crop of sort of second half pitching prospects this year.
I think I think that is true, and I think we've just gone through them. And so what we're doing this year is we're going to set the record for pitchers used, and we set the record for pitchers used last year, and we set the record for pitchers used the year before. So I think the injuries have led teams to pushing their prospects harder through the minors. And we also have this aspect of a missing year in 2020 where we were missing half the guys, and then we have these shorter drafts. So, I think there's a lot of, and smaller minor league systems. So there's a lot, when you see a trend like that, a lot of times it's multiple things coming together. But I would suggest that it's injuries plus COVID plus the smaller minor league system that has led to, yes, a lesser pipeline. And here's one thing that might be a little bit controversial, especially as a guy who promotes Stuff Plus, is there's, to some extent, most teams are now coaching using Stuff Plus as a major coaching tool in player development. And the reason that is if you want to tell someone to throw a better curveball, you kind of need to know what a good curveball looks like, especially given their arm slot. And so you want to be able to kind of put them on a graph and say, hey, if you add 1 inch of drop, you go here. But if you add 2 inches of, sideways run, you go here, So like that's the kind of thing that's being happening in the minor leagues. So everyone's pitch designing their pitches. And what we've seen is there's not going to be a single qualified starter that's 24 or under this year. And I think that's because we are so pitch design focused that we live a little bit behind in terms of like, how are you going to put all these things together?
Right.
Like what the art of being a starter and like getting outs and like, Clark Schmidt, we've seen this guy come up, throw a sweeper with outstanding stuff plus, throw a sinker that he should be Michael King. Why isn't he Michael King? This year is a little bit closer to Michael King because he's throwing pitches that don't rate highly by stuff plus, but fit together and make him a little less predictable and so on and so forth. So, I think that's an additional factor to why. But then, the injury affects the prospects themselves too, because we'd be talking about River Ryan right now as I think an amazing prospect for next year, or as a young starter that we're putting on all our lists next year, except his elbow popped as soon as he got to the major leagues. So, there's that aspect too.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned kind of the guys sort of not learning how to go deep into starts and stuff like that. Like,
they're not even giving them the pitches in the minor leagues.
Right. Like that's part of what I love about like Bubba Chandler closing the year in Pittsburgh is he is good. Like he's got, I think like almost a half dozen starts in the second half where he went 7 innings.
Yeah.
So like that just is that's rare to see from a good pitching prospect. It's usually like, Jackson Jobe here throw like 4 innings or 5 innings or 4 2/3 innings and like that.
Piggybacks. Everyone's piggyback. I do this thing. I have a AAA report that I do for subscribers where I have stuff plus for AAA players, and I have to sort. So to get starters, quote unquote, I do 50 pitches per appearance. That's where my line is. Because if I did it any higher, I would have a tiny little list of like 10 starters, So, and a lot of the starters come up with 80 pitches in their bag, and that's crazy. I mean, you're not expecting them to even go 5 almost in that scenario.
Any thing to say about Cody Bradford or Spencer Arrighetti before we get to the last question?
Yeah, Arrighetti might be a model miss to some extent. If you're looking for guys that, might not fit in Stuff Plus, it's guys who use their cutter as a slider, because in order to make our model more predictive, we counted cutters as fastballs. And if you look at Arrighetti, you'll actually see that his cutter in terms of velocity is, let's see here, his fastball is 94 and his cutter is 88. So that's a 5-mile difference, 6-mile difference. And that suggests to me that it's a slider. A cut fastball is more like 2 or 3 miles slower than your regular fastball. And so that's why his Stuff Plus isn't great. And if you call that cutter of his more of a slider, it would probably have a higher Stuff Plus model, and that would link up with the strikeouts because he's obviously a guy who can get strikeouts. He's gotten tons of strikeouts, and he's going to be interesting to me just on a strikeout rate alone. 27% on the year, 10.5 per 9. And so, the question then is, why hasn't he been better this year? Why the blow-ups? And I don't know. I think it's, slightly below average command. I think his fastball and cutter are his best pitches. His other pitches aren't quite as good. And so I don't know. Why do you think that he's been so up and down?
Well, he was like just a complete I had zero interest in him as a prospect. And I mean, even when he would show the strikeouts and like his first, I'm looking at his game log, his first he was really shaky like the first half of his big league season.
And a lot of walks.
Just tons of walks. And that's why I
Yeah.
wasn't really interested in him as a prospect. And then he has that 10 strikeout game against the Rockies. Great get-right matchup. And then from then on, he's got a 2.9 walks per 9.
Yeah, he's been better since that day. And what's interesting is the walks to some level are confidence.
Yeah.
You just have to throw it in the zone. You have to think your stuff is good enough. Maybe that one start against the Rockies was enough to be like, hey, maybe.
Yeah. Like I'm throwing all my stuff in the zone. They can't do anything with it.
Yeah, right. So I think he's interesting. I think I'll have him in the high 70s, low 80s, somewhere in there. He's going to be a guy worth drafting and seeing what his walk rate looks like. I'd watch his walk rate in the spring. Cody Bradford is interesting. I'm calling him an honorary old dude because at 26 he's not really old, but he throws 90 miles an hour. And his stuff plus is actually not as bad as you expect for somebody who throws that slow, but it's not good. The good news is he throws a fair amount of pitches, in that he throws a fastball, curve, and change 10% of the time, and then slider 7% of the time. So at least so he's a 4-pitch guy with command, with maybe an opportunity, but I think he's probably the 6th starter at best next year. I don't think they're going to depend on him. And a guy with a 90-mile-an-hour fastball he's going to have to do a lot to get on my sleeper list. He was on some of my sleeper lists going into this year, but that was when he was like, guys, you can pick after 500.
I should have lumped in Kumar Rocker here as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like you were early on that one, but
would I suggest we trade for him before he got the hype? Yeah. And we didn't pull it off, but he throws a death ball, which is a fun thing to throw. Death ball is kind of the Pete Fairbanks, if you want to think of it, the Pete Fairbanks breaking ball, which is a curve ball that just goes down. It doesn't have any sideways component to it. And what makes that even more interesting for Kumar Rocker is he's got the slot where you get sort of sinkerish movement. And so if you think a breaking ball out of that slot would have a slurvish movement, it would be kind of, it would kind of go down his arm path. And instead he throws this like super vertical curveball. So there is some deception in there. There's some interesting ways it goes together. Great velo. The only negative I have for him, and I think it has showed up in the big leagues and you've seen it, is if you watch a lefty face him, he has a lot of sideways movement on his fastball. It's more like a sinker. And the reason that sinkers don't go well from righties to lefties is the lefties see it forever and they can spit on it. If it's anywhere close from strike to ball, they're going to see it the whole way and they're going to spit on it. And so lefties, the walk rate is higher. He's walked more of the lefties. They've been spitting on his fastball, and it's because they can see it. So I don't know if he needs to throw a cutter or, refine that fastball a little bit, but there for a guy who had that great of numbers in the minor leagues, there's actually a little bit of work to do still.
Yeah. When he had that start against, I forget which minor league team it was against, but it was like late August. He had the 10 Ks and just that like 70% whiff rate or whatever. And the fastball was even harder on StatCast, I think, in that AAA start than it was when he was at Vanderbilt. And I referred to it as the best Tommy John surgery ever. How good he was when he came back. But that's good to point out, like the issue against lefties, because there's just going to be 3 big league starts people are going to have to look at on Rocker, and then this 40 innings or whatever it was in the minors, and then people are going to have to decide where to draft him for next year. I have no idea where the ADP is going to be for him, because he's also got a ton of name value, because just even people don't follow prospects know who Kumar Rocker is.
Yeah. 5 walks against lefties, 1 against righties. And so that's everything. And I'll be really watching. He may be one that fluctuates a little bit during spring as I watch for, is he throwing a sinker and a 4-seam? Is the 4-seam shape better? Is he throwing a cutter? There's a little bit more I want out of him before he's going to jump out of those 70s. So I may have him, in the late 60s is maybe one of those like sleepers I've been talking about, maybe ahead of all of them, but maybe below consensus, because there may be a group that just gets really excited about him. But if you're pushing him into the 50s, you're pushing him into a part of the rankings where there are established major league pitchers, that are projectable and that I may like more, so you don't even know how many innings your Rocker's going to give you this year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, could be, he's just such a wild card for next year.
Yeah. It's like, in other words, I want him if I didn't spend a lot, but I don't know if I'm ready to spend a lot.
Okay. Final question. We've had, so many awesome guys go from the bullpen to the rotation in the past few years. I rarely seem to be rostering them when they have these breakouts. I got Jeffrey Springs, but like Seth Lugo or Reynaldo Lopez, I have nothing on those guys. Are there any relievers you think would be a good candidate to kind of be that version of a reliever to starter conversion heading into 2025?
Yeah, I think one of the keys is they're not too old. Another key is they have multiple pitches. Another key is maybe, it hasn't been totally true of everyone, but they have to have at least a certain level of command. Reynaldo Lopez doesn't have plus command, but he's been demonstrating better command than when he first came up. And Hicks doesn't have great command, but there's a certain shelf there. They all have multiple pitch types, a little bit more of a starter's arsenal. And so, they're the guys that come to mind for me are Griffin Jacks, who has now pushed it to about a 5-pitch mix and with great command. And I think he can survive platoon splits and get through the order more. He's also a guy that used to start. I think a lot of these guys used to start too. Mm-hmm. So that's a part of it. Another guy that I think of is Nate Pearson, because it's a really good 4-seam shape. It's two really good breaking balls, like elite breaking balls. And he has a splitter that he hasn't thrown that much of. And so there's the mix there. They may find that he's easier to keep healthy on a regular schedule than someone who, he did back to back. Oh God, he's hurt. You know what I mean? Like, he's been hurt a lot, but what if it's like, if you just really dial in the schedule for him, he's actually easier to keep healthy. So those two are guys that come to mind. I
love that.
I've always thought that maybe Adrian Morahan could start. There's a chance that somebody like Cade Smith could start. He has a 3-pitch mix. He's been so great as a reliever that it makes you think, could he be a little bit less great and still be a really good starter? So, and he doesn't have the, like, Justin Martinez has like a 5-pitch mix, but that dude does not have the command to be a starter. Right. That's out the door, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, man, I love all the, Morion. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to stretch him out. He's just, the reason he ended up a reliever is just he couldn't stay healthy as a starter.
Yeah, it's injury thing. Yeah,
but that was kind of true of. It was a little bit true of Crochet, although he was a starter in college. Yeah, it's Griffin Jacks. I hadn't thought of that one just because he's like, easily like a top 10 reliever to me, almost from a.
He's a little bit older. 29 is a little bit older than some guys, but it's only 4 years of relieving. And at 97, what if he goes, he's pushed it from 93 when he was first relieving to 97. So if he loses 2 ticks, isn't he still pretty good? And he's over time, like, it's not just the sweeper anymore. There's a curve and there's a real change in there. And he's got 2 fastballs. So it's like a 4-pitch mix,
Yeah. So Jax is, he's such a good reliever that he will be getting like sort of drafted in that sort of top 500, I would think, for like draft and holds, maybe in like top 400. But like Pearson, do you see any, like, because the Cubs kind of bought really low on Ben Brown and then they bought really low on Pearson. Is there anything like sort of with the Cubs getting their hands on him that like you could give him? Like, is there anything they might do specifically with him? Because
one thing I do know for sure is that they have done something that, to varying degrees, different people have done, which is invest in health, infrastructure, and leadership. And in particular, they have a person there named Dr. Mike Son, who is an expert in fatigue and modeling fatigue and figuring out ways to get the most in terms of production out of a player while also keeping them healthy. So there might be a chance. And I know this is ironic to say after Ben Brown just, missed the second half of the season with that neck injury, but Pearson, they had I thought it was a very scienced out usage. If you looked at Pearson's game log, there was a lot of like 2 days, 2 innings, 2 days rest, 2 innings, so it's very sort of thought out in terms of how to manage his fatigue. And they're both hard throwers with iffy command and iffy injury histories. So there's something there that they're like, hey, we're a little bit lower than a lot of the teams in the league and stuff. So we're going to buy our stuff in this sort of risky package, bad command, bad injury. And we think maybe we have a way to sort of massage the injury and maybe improve the command a little or whatever it is. So
nice. Well, really appreciate it, Eno. Why don't you let the listeners know about what you got going on for the postseason over there at the Athletic?
Yeah, we'll at Rates and Barrels. We'll be podcasting during Monday through Friday during the playoffs. Just sort of 45-minute recaps and look forwards. We'll be at First Pitch Arizona live casting. I'll be doing a Stuff Plus revamp presentation down there in Arizona. I've got a piece coming up next week about the science of haters fastball and why it is unique. And so that should be a fun piece that's coming out.
Awesome, man. Well, keep up the good work. I think this is going to be the maybe most talked about Stuff Plus has been any offseason, just because of how prominently you can have it displayed on your Fangraphs landing page now.
Yeah, I love that now you can put in your game log, so you can even see, like, if you just go look at Sean Manaya's Stuff Plus game log, you can see where he changed his release point. Like you just see it right away. And it's fun also to see, like, you can see injury guys when they come back, or you can look at Reynaldo Lopez's injury and see how and his fatigue. You can see how the fatigue has affected him. You can really see it. Jordan Hicks's game log. So that's something you can monitor as an owner, where you're like, if you were looking at Hicks's game log and you for Stuff Plus and his results, you'd have dropped him earlier than a lot of people, I think.
Awesome, man. Well, like I said, keep up the great work, and can't wait to see you in Arizona here in about a month.
That's right. And happy playoffs.
Yeah, that'll still be going. Podcast is brought to you by Pick Six, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Use code RWPicks for $50 in Pick Six credits with a $5 deposit.